Hello, so in this video today I'm going to be talking a bit about social work theory, models, methods and approaches. So I am a practicing social worker and I do recognise that this is a really tricky area to get your head around all of these different concepts and also how they apply to practice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this down, but I'm also going to provide some brief examples around how I sort of apply this to practice, but they're by no means in-depth explanations, and definitely look at the original sources, but it might sort of provide you with a signpost so that you feel that you've understood it on a basic level and then you can go on and look further. In terms of the importance around this area, it's basically because as a social worker you're expected to have the skills in order to practice effectively and sort of work alongside people in partnership to implement positive change. So that requires like real good people skills and also practical experience. But alongside that, we also have to practice in a way that's informed by research and things that have been proven to work. And social work is comprised of knowledge from lots of different areas like sociology, psychology, human growth and development. Like everything that we are sort of taking from is from so many different areas, because social work itself is so dynamic, because we have to respond to changes in society and also changes in the knowledge base. So just because we learn theory at university doesn't mean that then we don't revisit it, because theories change over time and we need to sort of keep abreast of those developments. So basically it means that this is our way of making sense of a situation and understanding what is actually going on. So this is an attempt to describe, explain and predict social events. So that's what theory means in a social work context. And this is backed up by the evidence, studies and research that went into it. So in terms of a theory that I often use, it's systems theory, and I just find it really helpful because it helps me to consider the wider circumstances in the person's environment that's affecting them, beyond just looking at the individual and their behaviour. So it kind of gives you more of a holistic viewpoint. So if you see a person and they may be struggling, it's useful to consider other aspects of their system that maybe are having an impact on that. So has there been a change in their family system? Like, are they having problems in that area? What about sort of their economic situation? Or maybe are they unable to access education? Or all of these different formal systems that, or informal systems as well, that sort of impact on an individual. So there's lots of different elements to that if you look into the theory, and it is very interesting. And I think it's useful because it kind of shows how theory is useful, because often you can get challenged as a social worker on why you're recommending a certain way of working with someone. And I came across challenge on one occasion I remember distinctly, because I was involved with someone who was quite young, but they were an adult and they hadn't been involved in education for a long time. They felt that they weren't part of the community. They wanted to meet people, but they were also disabled and they were really struggling, and they needed sort of therapy around that, physical therapy. And someone who was involved with, from a charitable organisation that was meant to be getting people into employment, actually made a comment saying that they never thought that was a possibility for this person. And it just made me feel really bad, because I thought like that was their role, that they were meant to encourage people, and I just felt that it was writing them off. And I think often you do recognise when you're sort of educated to look beyond the individual and like what's happening, the barriers that they're facing, you really notice when people are just writing people off. And I think looking at these theories, it can be quite empowering really as a professional, and also to help other people that you might be supporting, because it helps you look at things in a different way. And I definitely feel I think differently about situations after learning about all of this through my training. And then in terms of a model, that's different to a theory, because like I said, the theory's around understanding something, whereas a model is more related to your ability to execute on that information and how you're actually going to intervene in a situation. So a type of model that I often use is task-centered practice, and that's based on behavioural therapy. So it's useful to know where the model came from, like what's informing it. So there's a lot to the model, but basically it's about creating actionable steps alongside a person that you're supporting to work on the things that they think they need to overcome in order to achieve something they're working towards. And it's important to note that it's meant to be time sensitive, and this is short-term sort of work with someone. So I often use this if there's maybe a situation where there's high risks in relation to an adult who may be self-neglecting and they're unable to care for themselves, but yet they don't want to accept care, and they're saying that they can manage, but you're sort of concerned that maybe they can't. So I had a recent situation where that was the case, and they were struggling with keeping on top of like the cleaning in the home, and I felt like it was really going to cause hazards in the home for them. So I set a goal of trying to work through those things, and a specific goal around how they were going to organise a certain area in the home, that they were going to try and get in the shower and try and have a wash because they felt that they were able to do that. And then I said that I'd come back the next week to review how they'd done, go back to the home and see what had happened in that environment. So that's an example of how you can use a model to sort of be really practical about it, and they can be really helpful. And then in terms of a method, that's a specific technique or tool that's often drawn from a model of practice. So a common thing that we do in social work is assessments. But within that, we can actually ask the questions in a way that we see fit. And that might be considering the person's communication needs, but also what they might need. So often I try and make people feel good by the time they've like come out of the assessment, you know, building people up, because often people have so much negativity in their lives, like they might be experiencing like really hard things. And I just think if you can notice things that people are doing well, that's really useful. So something that I use is the miracle question, and I know that I've used this with people who have maybe been struggling with addiction. So I sort of use it around if you didn't have this problem with you drinking, like what would your life look like from your perspective? Like, do you think that you'd still be having these difficulties that you're facing, or what would actually be positive about that? And it's kind of a way of asking a question where it's open-ended for the person to really tell you what would be a good day for them, rather than you imposing your views or coming across as judgmental. So I find stuff like that is a really good technique that you can use as a social worker. So yeah, that's a method. And then in terms of an approach, this is how we approach situations. So in terms of how I was saying, I sort of intervened with using a task-centered approach, and also the types of questions I'm using in motivational interviewing and things, sort of looking at a person's strengths. It's informed by a strengths-based approach and also a solution-focused approach. So that's sort of, as a professional, I often feel like that works for people, especially considering like the time restraints that we have, and that we need to try and help people as much as we can while we're involved. But it's also about equipping people with the skills so that they can manage when we're not involved as well. But I can also see how that's impacted on an organisational perspective as well, because often we're required to take that approach because we are short of time and because we've got high caseloads, because otherwise maybe I would spend more time taking a narrative and a biographical approach at times. So that's like more time talking to people and like finding out loads of information about their background and their history. And yes, I do use those approaches in my practice, but I just feel like if you had unlimited time, you'd probably use them more so than maybe the quicker approaches that you sometimes have to use. But I think overall, you can see how all of these different concepts interlink, so, and also how different factors would impact on what theories you use or how you approach your work. But I think understanding the distinction between all of them can be really helpful. So I hope this has helped, and maybe if people want to comment below on sort of what they think of this video, or even a theory or a model or an approach that you found particularly helpful. And don't forget to subscribe for more updates on my videos. Thank you.